There is a wake-up call here, and there is a lesson to be learned. There's a reality that has existed for a long time that we have been blind to, and that is climate change, extreme weather, call it what you will, and our vulnerability to it. It is undeniable today.
For years, scientists have been saying that a warming planet and rising seas would bring more extreme storms. Is Superstorm Sandy proof of what they've been predicting?
We don't have radio communications.
How many people answer that question seems to have more to do with politics than science.
It's true. Sandy was a freak storm, a bad luck confluence of a number of low probability events that could conceivably have happened in some alternate climate that wasn't warming. But this climate, our climate, is warming. And as it does, low probability events like this will become more probable and more intense.
I work at MSNBC, a cable news channel whose core audience is made up of liberals. And I see all the time how deep the divide is between the left and right when it comes to climate change, even here in New York. Across the river from Manhattan, where I work, is Staten Island. It's New York's most conservative borough and the hardest hit by Sandy. The storm killed 23 people here, more than anywhere else in the city.
Let's see if the Best Western in Bay Ridge has already signed up to accept FEMA. If they haven't, let's get that done. I got someone going to Home Depot now to get as much stuff as we can.
Staten Island's Congressman, Republican Michael Grimm, is a former Marine who served in the Gulf War. But he says this devastation is unlike anything he's ever seen.
We will help you, absolutely. That's what we do. This is what we do.
Grimm is also a skeptic when it comes to climate change.
And every time we have a flood, it's worse and worse. Last year we had a flood, 3 feet of water. This time, well, we 11 feet of water. And then what's gonna happen next time? 20 feet of water?
But is it possible this storm could change his mind?
Alarm clock moment for the world, because this report will tell us again that everything we thought we knew on climate change has actually been underestimated, that the effects of climate change will be upon us faster or intense fashion than we had thought.
We all know that human activities are changing the atmosphere in unexpected and in unprecedented ways.
And that the greenhouse effect has been detected, and it is changing our climate now.
The atmosphere and ocean have warmed. The amounts of snow and ice have diminished. Sea level has risen, and the concentrations of greenhouse gases have...
There is no more fire season. We have wildfires all year round.
Climate change, extreme weather, call it what you will, and our vulnerability to it.
12 years of drought has left the landscape bone dry.
We got any patriots in the crowd?
A new scientific report has determined the last decade was the warmest on record.
Our world is changing faster and more dramatically than ever before.
It is 5 o'clock, and the timing of landfall of this storm could be just an hour away. We've already been feeling the effects of Hurricane Sandy for hours now.
And the tide is up above the pier, which is scaring the shit out of me.
If you want to get off the island, you're not going to take the ferries. This has been shut down.
On the night of Hurricane Sandy, Patricia Dresch, her husband George, and their 13-year-old daughter Angela decided to stay inside and ride out the storm.
Then the wind started picking up that afternoon and trees started falling. This one tree from across the street just like peeled like a banana. And my neighbors took a picture of George that afternoon in front of this tree. Angela was with one of my neighbors, and they were on the beach, and she was taking pictures. And that was it. And then we had dinner. After dinner, I looked out my front door, and I saw the big waves coming. Then I went in my dining room, and the floor was starting to lift up.
What went through your mind when you saw that?
That we had to go up. When we got upstairs, we went in the closet. And we had to get out of the closet because the water was coming through the wall.
And it's on the second floor?
Yes.
So there was water high enough that it was coming through the wall?
George said, oh, the house next door is gone. I said, what do you mean the house next door is gone? He said, yeah, the house is gone.
911, where's the emergency?
Yeah, 687 Yetman Avenue in Staten Island. My sister is stuck in a house. She has total water around her. She can't get out the door. But they have a young kid, they have a 13-year-old with them also.
And what's your sister's name?
Patricia Dresch.
We went to the bathroom. And then when we went into the bathroom, I held on to the faucet.
What is Angela saying at that point? What's
She's
George
scared.
saying?
She said, Mommy, hold me, I'm scared. And I did. I held her, and I had her in front of me. And then a wave started coming up over me. I felt the water rising. And then all of a sudden, my stall shower came apart. And then the whole wall broke loose. And we went out into the yard. When I got thrown out of the wall, something slid off the roof, hit us in the head, and we went under. And I knew I lost her immediately because I knew she couldn't get up again. It was just too deep for her. I went down, way down deep. And as I was getting unconscious, floating down, I said, I'm not gonna die like this. I can't die like this. They're not gonna find me like this. And I got myself back up. And I grabbed the phone cables. That's how high up I was.
We have a patient with us. All right, to repeat, what's the condition of the patient? She was pulled out, she has hypothermia.
I still can't believe she's gone and he's gone. You know, I don't know, it's very hard. Life was cut too short. I'll never see her get married. I'll never see her grow up. I don't want to go see her in a grave. He doesn't deserve to be there. I don't want to see them in a grave.
See where that storm surge basically pushed right across the beach, right through these neighborhoods, and has basically inundated these streets. We'll count them off: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, close to 12 blocks inland. So again, that's a pretty far distance here.
In the U.S., Superstorm Sandy left over 100 people dead. Most of them drowned in the record storm surge. Here on Staten Island, some people faced down a wall of water 16 feet high. After the storm, Pat Dresch spent a week in the hospital. Now that she's out, she has to bury her husband, George, and daughter, Angela. The loss is felt by the whole community.
This was the perfect storm. High tide, full moon, everything came together and converged in a way that, and it happened, you know, I heard story after story, and I said to people, why didn't you leave? They said, Congressman, everything was fine. It was a little windy, a little rain. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I see water coming down the block like a movie. I grabbed my kids and ran as if Godzilla was coming. That type of thing, like all of a sudden, there's the monster.
When did you first hear about Pat Dresch and her family?
Later that day. I don't choke up easily. My eyes were welled up because all she kept saying to me, begging me, find my husband. Because at that point, they had recovered her daughter's body, but not her husband's. I don't think ever trained to see your friends and neighbors in total despair, hopelessness. And it just hit me harder.
One of the things that was interesting, the governor said this was a wake-up call about climate, specifically, after this happened. And I'm curious just what your reaction is to that.
The climate overall has changed.
But let's leave out the part of whether it's man-made or not, because I don't think the science is there to tell us what's causing it. I think Mother Earth evolves, and patterns change every so many 100 years or 1,000 years, and we're in part of a process of changing. But I don't want to get into the political debate of what's causing it.
At first, Grimm's answer doesn't surprise me. I'm used to politicians, especially Republicans, dodging questions about climate change. But the more I think about it, the more ridiculous it seems. Superstorm Sandy just destroyed part of his district. Doesn't Michael Grimm want to get to the bottom of what caused it? A month after Sandy, there's still a long way to go before Staten Island is back on its feet. No single event has ever consumed more of Congressman Michael Grimm's time.
We're going to break up into two groups. One of the groups has two locations with two elderly women that, but for this help, they probably wouldn't know what they're going to do. The fact that it's a month later and they still haven't cleaned out speaks volumes in and of itself.
I see it in their eyes that a lot of people are losing hope. A lot of people are thinking that they're not going to get through this. Then they're starting to feel the people forgetting about them, that they're not forgotten. Okay, your hands are freezing.
Yeah, it's cold.
It's cold.
A little while.
Okay. And it's going to be years, and I know that. And it's hard. And so we just want to make sure they understand they're not alone, they're not forgotten.
His office is overwhelmed with calls from storm victims.
If you want, I can help walk you through the process.
My staff has been unbelievable. I mean, they've been on the phone. A lot of my staff live in these neighborhoods.
Are you still living on Bard?
What needs to be done here? The scope of that is tremendous.
In fact, Sandy is turning out to be one of the most destructive storms in history. And it's leading to a big battle in Congress over how much to spend on the recovery. Grimm is teaming up with Republicans and Democrats from the affected states to get billions of dollars in aid for Sandy victims like Pat Tresh.
We're not that much different. Republican, Democrat, Jersey, New York. When your people are hurting, we all want to do the best we can for our community and ultimately for our country.
Pat's home was completely washed away by the storm. For now, she's staying in temporary housing provided by her church.
I'm not used to this, being by myself.
Seems like it was yesterday. I still have nightmares. There's not a day that goes by that I don't relive that last half hour with my family. Our last dinner together. I relived that whole experience with the water coming up over us in the house. How we got pushed out of the wall when I lost her.
My husband
was always there for Angela. Now he's gone. It's very hard. She touched so many lives.
If Angela Dresch had survived, this is the high school she would have attended.
So all of you guys were here during Sandy, right?
Yes.
It was very scary. My house was shaking. We stayed upstairs on the second floor the whole night.
I live in Great Kills, and the harbor was completely destroyed. There were boats in houses, and it was absolutely insane.
Actually went to
With all the talk about climate change following the storm, these students have some questions. Two climate scientists, Dr. Radley Horton and Dr. Heidi Cullen, both Columbia University PhDs, offer to help.
Just by show of hands, how many of you guys believe that global warming is actually real, that temperatures are increasing? So, unanimous agreement that temperatures are rising. How many of you think that it's our fault? Okay, so we got some questions. Gabriella, right? Where do you kind of think it's not us?
I know that we contribute because we have been burning fossil fuels, but I don't think that we're doing it enough so that we're causing climate change. Like the Earth, I feel like naturally does it. Then the Earth has to go through its cycles. I don't believe it.
Yeah. Well, Natalie, what do you tell Gabriella when she says that she doesn't believe you?
I tell her she's crazy. Well, because I don't know. I feel like since the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels have been using at an extreme rate, like cars, heat. I think humans definitely play a major role in
Well, you know, and it was fascinating because there were scientists who kind of made this connection that carbon dioxide was this thermostat, right? You crank up carbon dioxide, you crank up temperature, you crank down carbon dioxide, you crank down the temperature. And I think for me, as a scientist, what really pushed me over the edge was when I began to understand you can actually chemically fingerprint the CO2 in the atmosphere to different sources. Multiple lines of evidence do allow us to track it back to fossil fuel burning. And 1 out of every 4 carbon dioxide molecules in the atmosphere today was put there by us.
But I don't think that we are contributing to it so much that we're causing Sandy, and I don't believe that.
Right, right.
So I'm kind of agreeing with Gabriella on that point, but I don't know, I feel like human impact maybe played a role in that, but also the high tide with the moon definitely made the severity of the storm much worse.
That's a great thing to talk about. What aspects can we attribute to human activity, and what can't we? There are all these different elements that had to come together to make this terrible storm surge, but one of them was an extra foot of sea level that we had over the last century, largely as a result of climate change. What seems like a little bit, 1 foot, can actually have a huge impact on how frequently we get extreme events. It's like, if you think of a basketball analogy, it's the equivalent of like raising the floor of a basketball court by 1 foot without changing the height of the rims at all. You're just gonna get that many more slam dunks in the form of coastal flooding. And it did make Sandy worse, right? I mean, there were some areas where that extra foot absolutely made a difference.
A detailed analysis by the research organization Climate Central shows how global warming made more homes vulnerable to a storm like Sandy. Without sea level rise, flooding from Sandy would have reached about 8 feet above high tide. When you factor in that extra foot of sea level, most of which is due to climate change, the differences seem small at first. A block here, a few houses there, but over miles of densely populated coast, it adds up. In New York City alone, climate change put the homes of some 75,000 additional people in the path of the storm surge. And it's only going to get worse. Scientists say that by the end of the century, some parts of the coast could see Sandy-level storm surges every single year.
We all know that human activities are changing the atmosphere in unexpected and in unprecedented ways.
This is George H.W. Bush, speaking to a global gathering of climate scientists in 1990. Today, it seems unimaginable that a Republican president would sound the alarm on global warming.
The stakes here are very high.
But he was just continuing a long tradition of Republican environmentalism. It was Richard Nixon who created the EPA and signed the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts.
Preservation of our environment is not a liberal or conservative challenge. It's common sense.
Even Ronald Reagan took action to protect the ozone layer. In the early 2000s, John McCain fought for a cap-and-trade bill designed to curb CO2 emissions, the first national legislation of its kind.
Mr. President, that's the Arctic Sea. That's the Arctic Sea, and you look at the red line, the boundary of it in 1979. Look at it now. You can believe me or your lying eyes.
And in 2008, when McCain was the party's nominee for president, addressing climate change was part of the official Republican platform. There seemed to be a growing consensus between Democrats and Republicans on the issue.
We don't always see eye to eye, do we, Newt?
No, but we do agree our country must take action to address climate change.
And it seemed like Washington was taking action. A climate change bill actually passed the House in 2009. But the energy sector, led by fossil fuel companies, spent $500 million in lobbying and campaign contributions to fight it.
Drill all of America's oil, mine all of America's coal.
By the time it reached the Senate, not even John McCain would support it. Soon, Gingrich flip-flopped.
Well, it's probably the dumbest single thing I've done in recent years.
And the Tea Party, with lots of oil and gas money behind it, helped elect people like Michael Grimm.
I personally am one of the guys that has been skeptical of global warming from the beginning. The jury is obviously still out on it.
Suddenly, saying you accepted the science on climate change could cost you your seat. Just ask Bob Inglis.
A conservative who says that climate change is real? Now that is an unusual zoo animal, right?
A 6-term congressman from South Carolina Inglis was the most vocal Republican member of Congress calling for action on climate change.
A lot of people are elected based on coal money, on oil money.
I mean, how do you break through that if...
Well, it's tough. It's real tough. But, I mean, we just can't keep this up.
In 2010, he lost his seat to a Tea Party candidate in the Republican primary.
I had done some things that were clearly problems politically. But the most enduring here is he was just saying that climate change is real, and let's do something about it.
Since leaving Congress, Inglis is traveling the country, pitching a conservative solution to climate change. It would tax companies that emit CO2, but give a matching tax cut to other companies and American households. And he's trying to convince Republicans that despite what happened to him, they can't keep denying reality forever.
The worst thing in the world is not losing an election. The worst thing in the world is losing your soul. When you know there are things you believe in and you're not willing to stand for them.
Michael Grimm is exactly the kind of Republican Inglis is trying to reach. And Grimm agreed to sit down with him. But will it make a difference?
I was from maybe the reddest district in the reddest state. 93 American Conservative Union rating, 100% Christian Coalition, 100% National Right to Life, A with the NRA. So pretty conservative guy, right? When I was first in Congress, I totally poo-pooed climate change. I said it was nonsense, Al Gore's imagination. I had a great press conference one time where I absolutely tore Al Gore apart. But then my kids were growing up. My oldest, who just turned 18 when I was running again in 2004, said, I'll vote for you, Dad, but you're gonna clean up your act on the environment. Problem for me was his 4 sisters agreed, and his mother. And so I had this new constituency that could change the locks on the doors.
Well, that's
and so
the most important constituency.
I had to respond to this constituency, you know? So that was part of it for me. And then the other was I got on science committee when I got back to Congress, went to the South Pole, saw the ice core drillings, saw the evidence. What do you think it is that we Republicans have gotten in this spot of basically distrusting the scientists, you know?
I'm not so sure that it's distrusting the scientists. What Republicans are afraid of is if we give more credence to climate change, that it's going to be, you know, the call, the cry for more rules, more regulations.
Yeah, I agree completely. We're trying to change the conversation. We want to change it away from the apocalyptic visions that rightly signal conservatives that here it comes, a big old wad of regulations and a tax increase. We want to change it to a conversation about reasonable risk avoidance. You know, 98 doctors tell you to treat your son this way. 2 say no this other. It's not conservative to go with the 2. And that's really sort of where we are in climate science, right? We've got about 98 doctors that say it's for real and it's human caused. And we got 2 say no, it's not. It's sort of an odd place, I believe, for us as Republicans to be, that we listen to the 2. I mean, we actually not even listen. We seek out the 2. We call them to hearings. We want to hear from them, the 2.
Right.
Of course, in a way, I'm the worst person to try to convince you, because, I mean, look what happened to me, right?
Right. That's the politics, though.
Yeah.
If Republicans start coming out and let's say that they did agree with the science and they were bold enough and had the political courage that you had, if they believed it, to go forward, and then they lose, well, how many other are gonna, they're not all lemmings, okay? They're not gonna just go right off that cliff. So the political constraints, I think, are a lot bigger than most people would understand, and they're very real.
But you're also in a place that's had a different experience. You've had people that have been inundated with a storm surge that some of them may have this sense of need of addressing a problem. That may give you some room to move that others don't have. Hey, Bob here.
Hey, Bob, Bob's here.
Yeah, so the next item on the agenda is about the next trip to D.C., and we really need to discuss this, because that's coming up on Monday.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, too, the Rubio meeting with Senator Rubio's office.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio is a rising star in the Republican Party. He's also a climate change denier. But a few years ago, he wasn't, and Bob Inglis wants to convince him to come back around.
I have no idea what his position is on this, but I'd like to talk to him about it.
They have agreed, it won't be Senator Rubio himself.
Yeah.
Give you a little more wishful thinking that he will make time for us.
So, what do you think? The one argument is to wait until there might be an opportunity with Senator Rubio.
Yeah. I don't know, what kind of time he's going to have to devote to us.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. You guys.
No, I think that's right. I think he's clearly occupied with other stuff. So,
To fill playing spot.
if you lose in politics, it's sort of like everybody knows. And so it's sort of a pulling away, sort of like, avoid him, and it's continuing. And, it hurts because people think that I've sort of gone to the other side, that I've crossed to the other tribe. It's pretty painful. It continues to be. There's sort of a sense that you can't go home.
Is we're gonna fold it this way and then turn it on its side.
Yeah, no, the other way. All right.
So after we do it?
Yep, sorry.
Not a problem.
Today, Michael Grimm plans to surprise Pat Dresch. He's been helping her get a new home, but the process is dragging on. So in the meantime, he's replacing a family heirloom lost in the storm, an American flag commemorating her father's service in World War II.
We obviously can't give the exact flag, but this flag was flown over the Capitol.
Oh my God.
Okay, in Washington, D.C. This was done on behalf of your dad, so it is his flag. Okay. I actually folded it myself, being in the Marine Corps. I've learned how to fold a flag, but it's been a while, so it's not folded exact. I'm gonna refold it before I put it in. His service and his dedication will always be remembered, and I just want you to know.
Thank you. Oh,
That's my
oh my God.
You get you back back home.
That's what I want. That's what I want.
That's what you're gonna have, and I'm coming over for dinner.
Anytime.
Just...
I can't wait. I can't wait to hear the words. Here's the keys, start moving in. That's my dream, to hear those words.
Hey, how's the vote schedule look?
Michael Grimm has been working feverishly to round up votes for a $60 billion relief package for Sandy victims. But under pressure from the Tea Party, the same movement that helped get Grimm elected, the bill is suddenly abandoned.
The $60 billion aid package, without any explanation whatsoever, House Speaker John Boehner decided not to vote on before the 112th Congress ended. The decision occasioned a rare, full-scale, full-spectrum mutiny from New Jersey and New York Republicans.
I don't agree with his call to delay the vote. I don't. I don't support it at all. I think it was the wrong call. This delay is not what we wanted. It is absolutely inexcusable.
It means Pat Dresch and thousands of other storm victims will have to wait even longer to start rebuilding their communities and their lives.
David. Good. Slow it up. Slow it up, Junior. Bang. Right, do it again.
When that vote didn't happen, I gotta tell you, I was a little broken. It's very, very personal for me to deliver on the relief package.
You know, and it is a fight. Every day I go to work, I'm fighting with someone, whether it's the mayor's office, or whether it's the administration in Washington, or whether it's sometimes my own party. But it's always a fight.
Two months after Superstorm Sandy, Congress has taken the first step to give financial help to the many families and businesses in the storm zone that are still suffering.
Today, Congress gave the okay after delays and politics slowed down emergency aid.
As the months dragged on, Michael Grimm continued to help Pat Dresch through the process of getting a new house.
We still haven't done enough, and there's a lot to do, so that has not been lost. But at the same time, we do have to reflect on monumental steps forward, and this is a big step forward. The city to start accepting applications and to get people's lives back together, and that's what really this is about.
But for Pat, it would still be months before she finally had a place she could call home. It's now August, 10 months since Superstorm Sandy slammed into the eastern seaboard. It affected millions, and some people's lives were changed forever. But one of the most surprising things is how it changed Michael Grimm.
Last time you and I spoke, you said the jury was still out on the climate science. Do you still feel that way?
You know, after speaking with Bob Inglis, it made me do my own research. You know, I looked at some of the stuff that he sent over, my staff looked at. The vast majority of respected scientists say, you know, that it's conclusive. The evidence is clear. So I don't think the jury is out.
The basic story of we're putting carbon in the atmosphere, the planet's getting warmer, that's gonna make the sea levels rise. Like the basic story of that, you pretty much agree with, right?
Sure. I mean, there's no question that, you know, the oceans have risen, right? And the climate change part is a real part of it. The problem that we're gonna have right now, there's no oxygen left in the room in Washington right now for another big debate. That's the reality. You know, between immigration and tax reform.
I don't disagree, but let me ask you.
It's just not gonna take front stage.
But I wanna, there's a study coming out, because this gets precisely what. If you take just the amount of sea level rise and you factor it into what the Sandy storm surge was, this study says you got about 25 square miles of flooding that wouldn't have happened. So my question to you is, if in 3 years from now there's another one of these storms that takes out another 70,000 homes, it's like, at what point does this become the priority?
Washington is not real life. You see, you're talking the substance and the science.
Right.
And my point to you is irrelevant.
Right.
Irrelevant. You have to first get them to the table to say, let's work together.
So then what's your role in getting them to do that? If you told me there's too much other stuff going on in Washington right now, we can't get Sandy relief, you would say, sorry, excuse my language, bullshit.
Right.
And what I'm saying to you is, the people that live on this island are there's gonna be more storms, and they're gonna be worse, unless we get our act together. I mean, can you sit down with fellow Republicans and say, look, come to my district. We had water that in places it shouldn't have been.
Yes, but not while everyone is saying immigration, taxes, and members of Congress don't want to talk about anything else.
And 20 years from now, you and I are going to have a conversation where we look back. I really believe this. And it's like, what do you think about when you think about that conversation 20 years from now about where you were, where your personal voice was of leadership?
What I'm telling you is it's much bigger than me. I don't think that humans in America, Americans, have the will to do it.
But that's a terribly depressing statement.
It may be, but it's true.
But we had the will to settle the frontier. We had the will to land on the moon.
If you think my generation or the generation after me has that, I think you're living in fantasy land. They don't. They don't.
I wonder how you are going to look back at yourself as a member of the United States Congress if history unfolds in the way that I think the science says it does and makes these distinctions between the people that actually had the fortitude to stand up and say the unpopular thing and those who didn't. History judges those people incredibly harshly. It puts them in two categories. It puts them in the categories of people that met the biggest challenge of their time and people who didn't.
You know, politicians don't feel any support underneath them. They don't lead. The thing that encourages me is I know that a good number know better.
God bless, stay healthy. All right, be well. It's good to see you.
They know that we've really got to pay attention to the science. Experience is a very effective, but often harsh teacher.
Oh my God. It's supposed to be like this. No.
Well, we are being taught now about climate change. The question is whether that can be coupled with the hope that there's something that can be done.